Hello and welcome to another episode of Attacking Third, a CBS Sports Soccer podcast. I'm Sandra Herrera, joined today as always by my colleague and co-host Lisa Roman, NWSL analyst and broadcaster. On today's episode, we're still celebrating the CBA and we're going to keep doing so. NWSL ratifies the first CBA in women's soccer history ahead of the 2022 preseason. And we are joined today by even more guests. We are joined today by former players in the NWSL. Yael Averbuch was 11 years as a pro soccer player, former executive director of the NWSL PA, now GM of New Jersey, New York, Gotham FC. Welcome to the show. Yeah, welcome back. How you doing?
Thanks. Yeah, good. I'm excited to talk. I'm glad we're celebrating. So it's a good time.
Yeah, I'm glad we're celebrating too. We're also joined today by another friend of the pod, Lori Lindsey, coming on back to join us on Attacking Third. 18 years as a pro soccer player with the United States Women's National Team, WUSA, WPS, and NWSL, and is now doing broadcast analyst. We're laughing about it. Lori, how you doing? Welcome back.
Yeah, great. I mean, I'm old, is what it sounds like. So.
Not trying to do that to you. Man, yeah, congratulations to everybody and everything. This is it's historic, and that's why we want to keep celebrating it on Attacking Third. Congratulations are obviously in order to so many, and this is obviously such a success story, right? Considering what we're looking at over the last year or so with the CBA negotiations, with everything that has occurred, that the players have had to go through during their regular season, and now it's here. It's the first CBA in women's soccer history. So yeah, I'll just keep it simple for you. How excited are you about it?
Yeah, I think I haven't fully had time to let it really sink in, but I think even just listening to Lori's bio, something that strikes me that I think is so cool is I don't think we celebrate enough the amazing milestones in this league. And it's tough because we all see both sides of it. Like there are so many areas where we still want it to get better. And, we look at, it was a tough year, obviously, but then we're going into the 10th season. This is literally going to go down in the history books of women's soccer, the CBA. And we could talk a little bit about like why it's such a big deal, but just reflecting on that. And, it's a 5-year CBA, meaning there's a plan for the next 5 years of the league, which is another 50% of the time that it's even been alive. So listening to, the fact that in Lori's bio, we have to mention 2 other leagues is kind of sad, but it also speaks to how cool it is that we're able to have this conversation now. So I think we don't focus enough on that. Like 10 years based on what's happened in women's soccer here in the past is phenomenal. And where we are in year 10, I think is really exciting. So yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited for the future. And I'm excited for this conversation too.
Yeah, I know you mentioned all of Lori's accolades, and there are so many, and the 3 leagues, right? Like it's something to be celebrated and to be honored. And Lori, when this news broke about the CBA, you put it out there on social media. So I didn't blow your cover that you played in the WUSA, the WPS, and the NWSL. So now that there is a CBA in 10 years, in the NWSL, what is the most important part of this CBA, seeing as you, Lori, have played over 3 different leagues and now that there is a contract and an agreement?
Yeah, well, I really like what Yael just said in terms of like, we don't celebrate enough. And I think that is really important to keep in mind because I remember a conversation that Yael and I were having several months ago now, obviously when there's a lot of turmoil in 2021, but also not to forget that there were so many good things that were happening in the league as well, despite what was being really mentioned or in the forefront of the news. So I think that is a key part just in general, in terms of like, everything that has happened over whether it's just the NWSL or over all 3 leagues, the last 2 decades in women's soccer. It really is important, the milestones that we've hit and the trajectory that all of these leagues, or especially the NWSL, has taken. And to answer your question more specifically though, with I think Yael also said it best in one of her tweets the other night about the CBA, which is that I think the thing that stands out the most to me is it isn't about like the players versus the league. It really is about both parties coming together and saying, you know, how can we move this league forward in the best way possible that suits everyone involved? And I think that is really important to keep in mind, because that collaboration is going to be needed as this league continues to grow and build and continue to want to be the best in the league.
Really, you know, just sort of watching it all unfold the night that it, no, you're good. It's just watching it all unfold the way that it unfolded, right? The night before preseason. I just sort of like, I'm kind of like getting chills, like hearing you speak about what you're speaking about right now, Lori, and just sort of thinking back, see that as some of this was coming out, right, a lot of us were reacting to it in real time, right, kind of collectively online and stuff. Was there a certain point or a specific, you know, benefit or, you know, within this current CBA that like really stands out to you the most? We've been chatting a little bit with players already about this, and obviously a big one is free agency. But even speaking to somebody like a Mara Matthias, she even talked about just having something in a contract that talks about standard size fields. You know, is there anything in particular as a former player, just sort of looking at all these things that really sort of stood out to you the most?
I would say outside of the free agency, the minimum salary stood out quite a bit, because I joke, but also it is kind of disheartening in some ways, but this is probably the only profession where I continued to, you know, as my career went on outside the national team, I made less money from my very first professional year as a rookie than I did my last. I'm so sorry. People just want to keep calling me right now.
Hey, we got you. We got you right now.
And so it is, as much as like I can laugh at that now, it's also, it was a reality. And in terms of making a professional league in the United States viable. So to see the minimum of $35K for these players and then be able to have housing supported on top of that, I think, you know, is massive. And we're going to see players stick around longer, I believe, because of that, because they're going to be able to make ends meet in a lot of different ways and no more side hustles, hopefully.
Yeah. For you, anything particular stand out the most in these negotiations?
Yeah, well, I do think it's important to give context, like what Lori just mentioned. And I share this openly now. I did not during my career because it's not something I cared for people to know, but like the most I ever made in a year as a player in the league was $21,000. So to see the minimum salary where it is now in a fairly short amount of time, I didn't retire that, or actually didn't even officially retire, but I didn't stop playing that long ago. I think that's pretty cool to see. But really what struck me is I'm interested to know what the players feel about, you know, the contract and what they feel is the biggest win for them. But in working on this, on the league's CBA committee, I learned so much about what this is. This is a 150-page document. It might actually be more than that. And so the bullet point highlights are really cool. And those are the things that are kind of like the big ticket issues that really there was a lot of back and forth. But what I think is amazing is the fact that there is everything about the relationship between the players and the league and how things will operate laid out to such detail that like that just shows how big this document is. It's not just like, hey, here's how much money the players will make and here's the stipulations for the field. It goes into like specifics on medical staffing and mental health and things that before were not really conversations, but that's why this process took a year, because there, you know, both sides dug into literally every aspect of how the league is operated and what the player experience is like to come to an understanding on what it should be like moving forward over this next, you know, term of the contract. So I think that's something that I would never have understood. And I didn't even know what a CBA really was before I started delving in, but it's not just the bullet points. It's like a lot more than that. So I think it's pretty interesting. That's not the part that people really care about on social media, but it is interesting and really, I think, a great assurance for the players that all of this is laid out so specifically.
Yeah, it is so interesting. We spoke with executive director of the PA, Megan Burke, a few weeks ago. And I asked her, I was like, what is a CBA? Can you like put this in layman's terms? Like, I'm not a lawyer, just lay it out for me. So Yael, for you former player, right? Then you helped launch the Players Association. You acted as executive director for a while. What is your involvement now? Can you fill in our listeners about how you were involved over the last year and in these specific CBA negotiations?
Yeah, so right around the time that Megan Burke came on as the executive director of the Players Association, I was an advisor to the organization at that point. I was like, good, let's let Megan is an expert. Let's let her take over. There were talks about beginning to start the process of the CBA. And quite honestly, I joke about this. I was like, yeah, you know what? I want nothing to do with that part, like the legal contract part. Like I'll just be on the periphery now. So in the interim, during the year of the negotiation, I then took the role as general manager of Gotham FC, which meant I had to step down as an advisor for the Players Association because I couldn't work for management of a club and have that role. So in doing that, I ended up on the quote unquote other side, although to Lori's point earlier, there really are no sides in this, but when it comes to negotiation, you can't really you can't linger in the middle there. So I then was part of the CBA negotiation committee for the league, actually. So I started off kind of on the Players Association side of this, and then ended up working with others in the league, Brad Estes and John Walker from the league, to actually negotiate on behalf of the league to finish off the CBA. So very interesting for me personally, kind of seeing both sides and hearing conversations from both sides during the process. And then seeing it being done, I think we're all extremely happy.
Yeah, I mean, it's big celebrations, of course, right? Like this is huge. And for you, I just am so fascinated by this and the evolution of the PA and the league. And of course, the CBA, I mean, we've said it like 10 times already. It's 10 years in the making just for this league. But when you started with the PA and kind of grew your role throughout and weaved your way through now to be in these negotiations, when you look back at the first meetings of the PA, is this how you saw this ending?
Oh, no, I was literally trying to create a group me group so we could communicate among the teams. I always say this. I literally am not joking. My idea was, it wasn't a union. I had no idea what a CBA was. I don't even think I ever heard of that, I'm going to be honest, which is really sad. But I had the vision to create a group me group with a couple representatives from each team. And so that I could, as the leader of this, kind of form a good relationship with the league. At the time, it was Jeff Plush, who was the commissioner. So that just takes you back to like what year this was. And then if there was an issue going on with the players or news from the league, we could have good communication. That was where my vision ended at first. That was it. That was what it was supposed to be. And then I started to learn a lot more about how this actually works and what's necessary, not just for the players to, have a voice and protect their own interests, but actually to help grow the league. That was a huge thing that I learned about the role of a players association, is to be that voice and to help push the league in the right direction as the league develops too. So fast forward to now, I look back and I'm like, what in the world did I had no idea that this is how it works. And this is what, part of kind of something I and other active players started. So, it wasn't just me, it was a lot of us at the time who got this going, but no vision that this is where it was going.
I have a little follow-up on that too. Just looking at the humble beginnings of this Players Association, right? And then sort of watching the growth over the years. I mean, being here in Chicago, I've been able to cover the Red Stars a little locally, a little bit here in my time in the media space. And I remember Brooke Elby having a much bigger role, as well as the PA continued to evolve. So for you, what has it been like sort of witnessing all this, like as someone who eventually went to sort of the league side of things, like in an administrative role as a general manager, to sort of watch this Players Association evolve into a full-on union status type of organization?
From group chat to union.
Yeah. So,
which is amazing.
as we started, I actually I had a number of conversations with the MLS PA to understand, okay, like what did we start here? Where does this go? How does this work? And they were hugely helpful. But what ended up happening was then I had this kind of vision and understanding of, okay, here are the steps we need to take, and that this would eventually happen. That's when I kind of conceptualized, okay, you have to get your status as a union. Here's how you work with the league. Eventually there needs to be a CBA, all of this stuff. What was really tough in the beginning of that was to try to explain to the players and to get buy-in from the players to understand like the value of this, because at the time there was no organization. I was an active player and I was saying, hey, this is what we need to do, guys. And it wasn't just me too. There was like great leadership. Brooke Elby did amazing work as the president of the organization. She took it to a next level. Tori Huster, Emily Menges, Nicole Barnhart involved right from the beginning. And then Rachel Corsi came onto the scene, and we had different officers, in our history as a players association. But the real thing was to try to have the players understand before there was the CBA process, and they could see like, oh, this organization can work to provide this benefit, to try to have them understand what the point of this was. And none of us have been part of other industries or fields where we're part of a union. So to try to explain to people, here's what it means. You pay dues to a union, and here's the vision. That was a huge challenge. And Brooke and I would always joke, we would do these preseason meetings to try to explain the purpose of this to the players. And sometimes we'd get questions we couldn't even answer. We didn't know, how to explain it properly. So for me, I think something hugely rewarding about watching this is to see that the players truly get it, and how many players have stepped up in leadership roles in this, to voice opinions, to be on the bargaining calls. I was on the other side and I was seeing all these players' names on Zoom, that they were active participants in this process. And for me, it was really cool to see, like, now we all kind of get it, and now seeing, players just on social media celebrating the CBA being ratified was really, really cool to see how much that it means to everybody.
And I'll just say too, it's fun for me to hear this and how involved the players are, because I was involved in the WPS when we were becoming unionized, and Megan Burke was also somewhat involved with that as well. But we just never had a league long enough for players to be involved, right? It was more of like, okay, like, is this going to last? What are we going to do? It felt like you're scrambling all the time. And to be able to have that time to get players involved, because there are players. I mean, as you just mentioned, a number of people that have had their hands involved in this, Yael, is so important. And I think that's what makes it, from an outsider in terms of not playing in the league anymore, so special, because you're like, yes, this is a group of players that are like, this is what we have seen, this is what we've gone through, this is what we want from the league, how can we get there? And just having more voices and just feeling empowered to be able to speak out and really take an active role is what, Sandra, when you and I were kind of joking, but not really, about crying the other day, the other night, I was like, that's what I'm crying about, is that these players can feel like they had such an active role in what the future of this league looks like, which has not been the case for, I would say, the majority of players have played in previous leagues.
No, I'm right there with you. I think it's also just, which is why I asked Yael just sort of maybe speak up a little bit about watching the evolution of this Players Association, because I think, in the days pre-pandemic, when access was a little different in terms of media and stuff, in the relationship with the clubs, my God, like I remember like literally getting a moment to like watch Brooke Elby in action. Like there was a really tough decision that had to be made. There was like a snow day that was like impacting match day. The field of play was not great. I remember watching the players going out there to do warm up, still trying to do their jobs, like go out there and test out the pitch and give it a shot. And watching this, president of the Players Association and Brooke Elby just saying, this is not good for us. Like someone's gonna get hurt. And just sort of watching her get in action, sort of collect the players. We're talking both sides of the pitch here. We're talking about the opposition. I believe it was the Reign at the time and Chicago coming together, talking it out, trying to get on phone calls with the right people at the time. I believe it might've been Amanda Duffy at the time, to sort of figure out a way to have this match happen, but in a safe capacity. And I believe there was a postponement that was placed, and then everybody ended up just playing it the next day. And it's just these little these little moments, right, where we're watching these players do very important work, and maybe they themselves not realize that they're laying the foundation for very important things to happen down the line, like a CBA like this, and showing how effective something like unity and solidarity actually works and what it looks like, because if not everyone's on the same page and in agreement with that correct choice to postpone the game doesn't probably happen. So to sort of see these things and be able to witness them again pre-pandemic and at time was just to sort of now and sort of seeing that news break in the night, which is why I tweeted what I tweeted. I was like, oh, I think I'm crying a little bit, like question mark. It's like, it's just kind of like because of these experiences that we've all sort of in our own ways kind of witnessed, from these players as they've kind of grown up a little bit within this PA.
Yael and Lori, you both touched on this, how watching these players find their voice almost. We did have the pleasure of speaking with North Carolina Courage's Merritt Mathias. And that's one thing that she actually touched on. She said that, of course, it's so empowering to have a CBA and she feels so safe now, but she gained a lot of confidence throughout these CBA negotiations and finding her voice and finding the courage to unmute herself on Zoom and speak and really share her experiences. And do you think that having these players being able to be vulnerable in that space, in the negotiation room, in front of high people in the league and in front of lawyers and standing up for themselves, do you think that that's an evolution that has been slowly happening? Or is it really the state of 2021 that did change a lot for this league and for the players in it?
Lori, do you want to start with that one, or I can jump in?
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, I think both. Part of this, I think, is that, and I would say this is something I've reflected on personally a lot, is how much as players, and this was something I did, and as a leader, I feel a little guilty of, is we were so desperate as players to make sure the league survived and was healthy at all costs that a lot of it was like, let's keep these things quiet. If we had a bad experience personally, if something wasn't right, let's try to handle it behind the scenes. We don't want that to get on Twitter. We don't want people to think bad things about the league. We want it to be here at all costs. And then I think it got to a point where we know that the league will be here. It is successful. There's been, the owners have invested a massive amount in this as well. I think we can't speak enough about, it's not just, we're talking a lot about the players, but obviously for things to run, there's a ton going on that I'm now learning about on the league side to continue to grow this. So there's that. And then it's, this year, a lot of really brave women came out and said, this happened to me and it wasn't okay. And whatever that is, there's a whole spectrum of things. And to know that you can say that, and that you'll be believed, and that the league is still going to be here and we can make it better, is really, really powerful. And I think we didn't know that before. We didn't know, one, if players would be believed or listened to, and often they weren't, we've learned. And we didn't know if the league could survive people saying, hey, I love this game, but this isn't good enough, or this happened to me, or this isn't healthy for me. So I'm glad that we've learned that we can all withstand that, and we can get better from it. And there's huge power in that. So I hope that players now feel really comfortable speaking up, more so than I ever did, more so than, I think my peers in my playing days did.
Yeah, I think that's perfectly said. And I relate to all of that. And, I think the thing too, is that there's power in numbers, right? And as Yael just said too, brave women coming forward and speaking out was huge, right, for this. But now you have a collective. I mean, these conversations, Yael and I were teammates, and these conversations were happening just behind the scenes. But one, how do you get that out? How do you say that? I mean, it was a pretty fear-driven environment for a long time. And now, as Yael just alluded to, when you have somebody that's brave and steps up about some really important issues, I think that just elevates everybody else. Like, okay, how can I do my part? I need to speak up. And then when you have the collective, then you just feel more and more empowered. And, I think rounding out kind of what I was saying from the beginning, that to me is what sums up this CBA. Yes, the bullet points and stuff are amazing, and all the details that were mentioned earlier too, but just the power in that for the players to have a collective voice and to say, okay, like we have ownership, because in the past there hasn't been that. It's very much like hiding and hoping and just getting by, right? And it's as much as you love the sport, there was times when that was very difficult.
A bit of fear driven throughout the entirety of this negotiations. I think that's very honest to say and very truthful, and what maybe makes the conclusion of this and that much sweeter and that much more to celebrate, because it was such a long road for the players and former players to get here. When we look at more of the details of this CBA specifically, I mean, free agency is one that is just being celebrated throughout fans and players and former players right now. It's starting in 2023 for players that have given 6 years of service. Now, Lori, I'm looking at you for this. As a player that didn't have the option for free agency, how does having free agency in the NWSL change the league moving forward for veterans, especially?
Oh, well, I think to be able to have a say in where you're going to go, that alone is amazing, right? So I think, it gets us on par with the other leagues in the world. But also, again, just having a say about where this is a career, right, for these players, and to be able to have the freedom to be able to move, and again, to have the say in that, it is massive. I like the structure of it. So if you have some longevity in the league, then that starts quicker. Instead of just it's a free for all, and that maybe wasn't going to be a big negotiation. I don't know, because I wasn't obviously in the meetings. But yeah, I mean, I think anytime that you can have the ability to have some say in your career is huge. And I think that just opens up doors for more movement in general. Players, I said this in the draft too, about players being able that were under national team contract and then signing with their teams. Some players might go overseas, but there's going to be a lot more room for movement in the long run that I feel like will just make the league stronger.
Yeah, I think looking at how they're going to roll it out, I think was not only interesting, but I think it's actually kind of smart, and it makes sense that this was the terms that both sides of the table actually kind of ended up agreeing upon, when starting it in 2023, right? We're talking about a year out, 6 years of service, 2024 players, 5 years of service, and then a concept of some restricted free agency for players in 2024 with 3 years of service. So sort of just kind of staggering it out a little bit. And this current CBA is going to run through 2026, and maybe you don't want to put the horse in front of the carriage here, but it's been 10 years, right? In terms of this league, in terms of talking about salaries in the league, and in terms of a competitive salary, going from $22K in 2021 to now $35K in 2022. I'll just ask it. Is it good enough? Is it good enough? Laura, I'm going with you on this one, Lori. Is that good enough right now?
I mean, I'm one to say that no, it's not good enough. There's an asterisk there, because yes, is it better than it was? I think we're making massive headway in other areas as well, and it's not. It's more nuanced than just saying good or bad. Right. However, I think it is important to pinpoint that there is progress. But I mean, we're always going to strive, right? Strive for better and to take care of the players even more. And I think this is an excellent starting point to at least continue for negotiations. And there's a lot of other things in this CBA that, one, I'm not familiar with or know all the ins and outs, but there's also a collective amount of other things that help bridge that gap in terms of just being the pay or the minimum pay at $35K.
Yeah, and increasing year over year. I mean, there are so many nuances in this negotiation and in the CBA, and that's why lawyers look at it. And that's why we have smart people like Yael on the committee reading this 150-page document. So then when we get to the end of it, we do have a bit of celebration. And this dropped the night before preseason started. So we're into it. 2022 season of NWSL is here. We are in the thick of it. Yael, for you, it's the first week of preseason. You're in the front front office at Gotham. The fans are hype. The media, we're hype. You guys are hype as former players, but at Gotham this week, preseason, how are the vibes? How are the players feeling? What is the energy like?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of excitement. I think there's always a lot of excitement surrounding preseason, but this one is really special because of, the CBA and the timing of it. I do want to point out one more thing, not to skirt your question, because I do think people here are really excited. Unfortunately, we have to be indoors due to the weather situation, but there's a lot of excitement and good energy. But I want to point something out that I think is really, this was a lot of the conversation on the league's part too, is that when we look at player compensation, it's not just the base salary. Like, the teams provide housing. There's like benefits of 401k now as part of the package. So we're looking at, is the number 35K good enough? No, everybody would hope that, that goes up over time, but I believe that, and a huge talk here when it comes to this total compensation was also like growing the pie for everybody. So we've always said this as players, is we want the league to succeed so we can, as players, I'm saying we still as players, but so the players can share in the success of the league. So now seeing that, it's like, how do we have everybody succeed more? And that's what the work is over the next 5 years. So the next time this is the conversation, there's a bigger pie to split up and for the players to have a slice of. So I think that it is very, very positive. Although you could argue, like, is that number good enough? I think these are top 1% in their field athletes. So it will never be good enough. You could pay millions and millions and still not good enough to, I think, but the overall compensation package is really, really much improved and a huge investment from the league over these 5 years
it's a great point. And and also the mental health aspect, like to be able to take and that's what I was mentioning too. There's a lot more that it's involved than just the base salary, but you make some really good points.
I think coming off of what the season that we've come off of, and like sort of looking at those type of points, right, that maybe aren't like the free agency, right, which is the big one, raise the minimum salary, which is a big one. When we start looking at those things like the 6 months, right, mental health leave, the added benefit of parental leave that will cover a pregnancy, right, or adoption, right? Looking at all of these things within the CBA that are very clearly within them because they're directly from player experience, right? There are parents in this league who have gone through pregnancy, and there are parents in this league who have gone through adoption processes, right? There are players in this league who have gone on record talking about the importance of mental health, right? And like seeing these things in the CBA are so directly reflective of their personal experiences, and obviously seeing those things come to light, we're all thrilled about it. It's incredibly, there's a certain level of joy, I think, that maybe can't necessarily be explained for people who might not understand unless you're really in it, or if you're a former player taking a look at all of these things. And one of the things I think that sort of was kind of got me going, I think, in terms of the emotion wagon, right, on that night, was the fact that these statements are rolling out from the PA side and detailing some of these bullet points, and they ended by thanking former players. They ended it specifically saying, we stand on your shoulders. This is for you, and we hope we made you proud. So I think maybe to close things out for the both of you, for both wearing your former player hats, how proud are you of these players?
I'll go first. Well, first of all, I'll step back to Elisa's question to Yael about Gotham and how excited people are. I mean, listen, I was a Spirit player, but I'm excited about Gotham. I would come out of retirement to play on that team right now.
Breaking news, baby.
Lori, let's
heard it here first.
I mean, if they're not excited, well, I'm excited for you all. No, I think that's the history of women's soccer, really, and a lot of women's sport is celebrating the people that have come before, because it has been a long road. It's been a challenging road to stay the course, to continue to fight. And I know, for a long time, I I think I have had a unique privilege of seeing all different sides. Like I played on the national team, so I got to see what that was like. I understood what it was like to be a rookie without playing on the national team in the WSA. And then the last year of my career in the NWSL, again, not playing on the national team and just closing it out. And so seeing all these different glimpses, I guess, into women's sport and the longevity of women's soccer. But I think that has been the history, is continuing to build off of the generation before you and leaving the sport in a better place. And, Julie Foudy's and Brandy and Mia and Brianna Scurry, those players that came before us and really fought to kind of steamroll and build the momentum to where we are. And especially on the national team side of things to now with like Yael and Brooke Elby, as we mentioned, Megan Burke, who's led the way in terms of representing the players on the legal side, and Tori Huster. I mean, these players have been around for so long, and to be able to continue to learn and use their knowledge and just their understanding of what it's been like is huge. And I couldn't be more thrilled. Like, I love this league. I love the players in the league, and I'm excited because I think that we are going to start to see an even different level from these players, because hopefully, it's always continuous, but I think you'll see a bit more ease for a lot of players, because this CBA is helpful and in so many different ways. And that's important, to be able to perform at your top, emotionally, physically, and mentally. So I could start crying now. So I thank Yael and all these people, and I'm thankful for all the people that came before me.
How about you? Was there anything in particular?
I can't top that. Yeah, no, I think like it's interesting to feel that how much all of us are just one piece along this journey. To Lori's point, there were players who came before us, who I looked up to and who charted the way and played in leagues that no longer exist and were early NWSL players. And then to be able, for me now, I think a huge thing, I kind of jokingly share my salary, because I think it's a really important point that in my 10th year as a pro, that's what I made. But then to be able to, as now a GM, sign players to salaries that are significantly better than that, is a really cool feeling. Part of me always has the natural human instinct to be like, oh man, I could have made that. but the other part of me is like, this is so cool. I'm doing like, get out my calculator, like how many more times are they making than me? But that is such a cool feeling to be part of seeing that transition. And the reality is the women's game is still young enough that we're all in this community, literally the people who started off like the first ever women's national team and were part of, the other leagues, like I mentioned, to now is we all know each other and we're all still watching this happen. So it's at a really cool place where we can say that, where the history is still young enough, and we're watching it happen right before our eyes.
Absolutely. I want to thank you both for joining us. I think that's a great note to end on, right? Just the amount of joy that there is, but still the amount of hope that everyone still has looking into this next era for women's soccer in the United States. A lot of work has been done, but that doesn't mean that the work is done completely. So I'm excited to continue to watch and cover the evolution of these players, their union, and all of the great things that they continue to do on and off of the pitch. We always like to thank our listeners at the end of the show too. So thank you everybody for listening and joining us. Yael and Lori, thank you once again for being with us today. Everyone, you can follow us on Twitter at Attacking Third. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you're listening to your podcast shows. You can leave us a 5-star review on Spotify. And if you have any questions for us, you can leave us a 5-star review with a question on Apple Podcasts, and Lisa and I will answer it as part of our mailbag segment. We're also available as video. Please subscribe to us on YouTube. Visit youtube.com/Attacking Third. And we'll be back tomorrow with more news and more celebrations of the CBA and updates from around the world of women's soccer. For Sandra, Herrera, Lisa Roman, Lori, Lindsey, and Yael Averbuch West, this was Attacking Third.